Hello and welcome to a very special TransForm Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased today to present Glen Schild, coming from us from the UK, who has built a really cool application using both Alpha TransForm and Alpha Anywhere. And so today we're going to take a look at that application, and because there's so much to cover, instead of our regular 20 to 30-minute sessions, this is actually going to be an hour long. So grab a beverage, sit down. I think you're going to be impressed by what Glen has to show you. So hello, Glen, are you there?
Hi, Dave, yes, I am.
I am, excellent, great. I can hear you and I can see your screen. So let's get started.
Okay, right, thank you. Just a quick intro. I've been using Alpha Anywhere for far too long, since the DOS days. But in anger as a real business for about the last 15 years, when I went full on self-employed developers, I've got lots of applications out there, been built up over the years, lots in development and lots going on. But I kind of hooked into TransForm pretty much early on. I guess I was one of the early adopters and thought there's a place for it. The purpose of this is just to demonstrate a use case which is currently under development for one of my clients, where I'm using TransForm with Alpha Anywhere as an integrated system. So a bit of explanation about this case, and if the technology will work. Here we go. Okay, so one of my clients makes things out of bits of metal. That's putting it a little bit too simplistic. They make very complicated things out of metal for the rail and the power industry, including nuclear. So there's a lot of safety critical work that they have to do. But in essence, every single job is different. They get a set of plans from their customer. They then have to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. They've got to figure out the process of building what they've been asked to build and the materials they're going to need. So they develop a detailed and precise set of instructions that really do need to be followed. And every single step within those instructions has got associated estimated costs. They estimate the labor and they estimate the materials. So the business, like any business, needs to track the actual cost of production in order to maintain profitability. In other words, when they put together their quote, they're trying to figure out, well, we think it's going to cost X. We add on our margin, we add on a bit of contingency, and Y is what we're going to charge. So they then need to know if they actually can deliver on that as they start building that particular piece of product out of the metal. Before I got involved, everything was completed using paper forms. So they would do the quote, get submission approval to go ahead, and then they would get to work on the factory floor or the workshop, start building things. And all the time sheets that were being processed by the operatives on the work floor were completed in paper. But like anything, there's a lot of challenges with that. A lot of things were being missed and it wasn't particularly accurate. So having now built a new system, we developed something called the job card. And that's as far as I'm going to go with the PowerPoint side of things. So if I first of all jump in and actually just show you the application. So just going to log into it quickly. I'm allowed to show certain bits on here, but I've got to be a little bit coy about certain parts of it, but I can show enough to go in. So if I look at a job itself, go into the job, the one I've pre-selected for this. So the job, once it gets to this point, they've already done the work of actually scoping out what they need to do. And they have what they call a route card. So I'll just show this. It's a job card itself, which details step-by-step instructions of everything they have to do. So in this particular case, they'll start off with an inspection. They do some fabrication, which the estimate is going to take 2 hours. There's another inspection. They set up a machine. They do some machining. There's an inspection. There's another inspection. There's another inspection. There's nothing extra on here. So they've got a step-by-step process to work through. Like I say, before we got involved, they would hand write onto timesheets when each of these things were done, but they wouldn't do it to this detail. So what we've added is we've uniquely identified each route, and that's what these numbers over here are. Initially, we were going to use QR codes, but one of the problems we found was that when you scan a QR code, if you've got too many close together, it just you're very unlikely to hit the right QR code because the device would instantly pick up the first one it sees. So unless you're incredibly accurate, it's not going to work. So we had to go with a set of numbers. So each of these is the unique reference for that route. And how that then replicates within the actual job, I'm hoping the tech can work here now. You can see that there's that same thing is replicated on screen, where you've got each of the sequences step by step. Inspections are highlighted in red here, and some of this has already been done. This is an old job, but I'm using it for demo purposes now. So before we got involved, they used to do timesheets on the system. We moved it onto here, and we used to have what we called a batch. So each operative would have one record for each day that they work, and they would fill in the timesheets. So literally, they gathered the timesheets at the end of the day, and the following day, a member of staff would then key them all onto the system so that they could then record the time. And this is how they would do it. They would come into the system here, and they would add a new record to this particular batch if there was already one there, to put in details of what it is they've actually did on their paper timesheet. But inevitably, they wouldn't detail it out. It would just be they might have worked on a machine for 6 hours, but they wouldn't necessarily, might be 3 different jobs, but they'd lump it all into one job. So it wouldn't necessarily give them an accurate representation of what they did on a job by job basis. So to replace this, I'm going to fire at the, hopefully get the tech working here. And I've got an iPad Pro, which I'm using for this, but they've actually got Android tablets in the workforce there, in the shop floor. So come on. So if I just log in, I've now opened up the TransForm app. And this is a very basic form. It doesn't showcase everything that TransForm can do, but it's more about the concept today of how they go about replacing the paper forms with a digital version. Okay. Right, so when they have around the workshop, they have more than one workshop. They have some of these devices kicking around, and they try to make it as simple as possible. But one of the things they wanted to do was as minimal amount of interaction. We're talking about people who are really good at machining things out of metal, but coming to other types of technology, probably not so. I'm being polite. There's a whole bunch of forms, but they can only actually see this bottom one, the timesheet one. So the timesheet one is designed to do a single record entry per time they run this form. So this is still in testing, but what they can do is say, pick up who they are. So I'm going to say it's him from the list. And now they have, you can see here, there's mandatory fields on here. There's a red dot here to say we've got mandatory fields, which are the route number, and at the minute, the actual minutes, but there's something else will go. So if I just bring back up, this is the job card. Let's just say I'm going to do this one here, which is 54578. So if I go into here and say, right, the route card is 54578. And what will happen is as soon as I hit the done button or the green tick at the top, this makes an API call back to the server to go and get details of that particular routine record. And it's there as quick as before the screen refreshes, it's already there. So it's brought back the job number, it's brought back details about that particular route so they can validate they're actually on the right piece of work. This one actually had no estimated time built into it at the minute, but if I say, right, I'm going to put in here 15 minutes. Now, because it's actually job specific, there's 2 extra questions that have appeared here, and they are mandatory now. The first one is, did they actually finish that route? It could be they were doing a machine and say that it was 4 hours worth of work. They did 2 hours, but they hadn't finished it yet, so they would mark it as no. I'll say yes. Was there an issue? So if they were estimating, say, it was going to take 4 hours, but they actually took 6 hours because the machine broke down or something else got in the way, they would actually say yes to that question here and then put the notes in here as what the issue was. But I'll say no for now, and then I'll submit it. So if I upload that now, that pushing it straight back into the server, and they get on and do the next thing they need to do. So if I go back to the application, if I just refresh this now, and you can see now in the system, Darren Fowler has now got one item for 15 minutes, and it was against that job, immediately recorded in the system. So the first plus here is that the operatives are driving their own timesheets. The person who is used to employed had to spend most of the following morning keying all the entries in, doesn't have to key anymore now. What they're now doing is actually validating, they're looking at the data to be put in and looking for anomalies. You can see here that during a normal working day, they do 460 minutes and they need to account for 460 minutes every day. So if there's some that are different, like this one down here, 345 minutes, it might be he had some authorized time off and they know about it, but they're double checking for the accuracy of what's been put into the system. So if I just pull this back up again now, and I'm going to add a new form now, because not everything they do is job specific. This time spent when they're not actually working on a particular job. So if I go and put him in again, but this time now they have a laminated sheet next to each of these tablets, which has a list of codes for non-work related items. So, and those route numbers are quite low. So if I just go and select one at random, 19, you can see here now it's non-job related work and it's charge hand duties. So let's just say you did 60 minutes of whatever that involved at the time, and you could put notes in if you want. Note now there's no need to put those routes where the route's completed, because this isn't related, it's not related to a job. There's no job number in here. It's just additional time that's been he's been marked out for. So if I submit that, okay, that's done. So I go back to here now, and if I refresh that, you can now see he's now got 2 lines in there, and he's got 75 minutes worth of work. So if I go and look at that, particularly that record, you can see now he's got there's 2 entries there, the final inspection and the charge hand duties, and all the way over on the right, 50 and 60 minutes. And there's a labour rate charged against it as well. If I go back to the actual job, and I just refresh this, if I zoom on it, you can see now that the final inspection time here, it's now got that 15 minutes that we added in. So it's now pulled it through into that particular job, and so therefore they can start building the details of that job and working out the cost effectiveness of this. So the first thing on here is that how does it grab the actual data from the API callback? So if I go into Web Projects Control Panel, it's using a web service built in Alpha. But before I do that, if I look at the XBasic, there's an XBasic class here. And the XBasic class, the function in here is called get route data. So this is the actual XBasic function that's been built into Alpha to actually go when they put in the route ID number into the TransForm application. it then goes off and grabs it. So what it's doing here, oops, technology is great, and I'm still getting used to this. Okay, so it's just created a SQL connection string. It's passing in that ID, which is what I'm getting back from the API. And I'm just going off and selecting the detailed SQL query from the job routing table. And then at the end of it, go back to there, and then literally opening the connection, I'm executing the SQL script. So I'm going to grab the data, put it into a result set, creating an array, passing that data into an array, closing the connection, and then I'm doing JSON generate to put it into JSON format, and finally returning using the XBasic function JSON reformat safe to make sure it's all compliant. And that's what gets passed back. And I can show that if I go to the actual web service. Again, this has been created in Alpha. So this web service, there's several different functions on here, but the get root data one is on here. And again, thank you for doing this, Alpha, but there's a live test API you can do right within here. So I just opened up a local instance. So I can see here that the get root data is there. I can try it out. And if I put that root number in there, 54578, and execute it, it returns a 200 code. It's got a valid return, and there's the actual response. So that's what got returned back to TransForm. So that's the bit. So that's the lifting done by Alpha Anywhere to get the actual data out of the application to be able to put it back into TransForm. And the one thing I haven't done is I haven't fired up the Alpha TransForm. So bear with me 1 second. Just go into it. So I'm going on to the web application now. Okay, so I'm logged in. So if I go and find that form, and it's timesheet. So if I go edit the form, see it's a very straightforward form, but the layout here is I've designed it for their particular tablets in landscape mode, so it does fill the whole screen. But if I now go to the TransForm programming language, so edit custom code, and the first thing you can see, there's a couple of things that happen, and the one I'm looking at is the root number here. So if the root number gets changed, then what actually happens is that first things first, so when I put the new root ID in there, it passes into TransForm the form of a global variable, this hi-hat GS root ID equals, and then the point here is that the hashtag job routing ID, that's the name of the field on the form. So it's grabbing the data that I've entered into that field, passing it into the global variable, and then I'm running a function called lookup root. So if I go to the function, there's lookup root. So what this is doing, it's making the API callback. So first of all, I'm putting into a variable that global, I'm passing that value from the field into the variable. I'm building the URL to run that tfservice service API for the get root data function, which passes the ID in plus that variable. And then basically running a function built in called Ajax get. And a lot of this should be very similar to the Alpha XBasic, but I'm actually using that URL to go and fire that Ajax get. Bit of error trapping in case it doesn't work. But then I'm basically passing the response that I got back. So using the JSON pass function into an array. And then I'm using, because it's zero-based first value, so it's only ever going to return one record, so I'm only worried about the first record. Then I'm populating that each of those fields, hashtag field name, all the way through with the RData job, and then the actual field that's coming back in on the JSON from the API return. A couple of things to bear in mind here is you can't have blank spaces or underlines in field names in TransForm. So you've got to be wary of that, but that then populates it out. So that's the process of getting the data from the application into TransForm and therefore onto the form. And the final part of this equation then is what happens when I click submit, and when we hit submit button and the form is pushed back up to TransForm Central. But the first thing is on here is there's a definition of an on-submit event built into the application. And I've got quite a few on here, but if I go into JSON view, and that's the one, you can see what it's doing is actually there's a post data action. So TransForm knows that when this particular form, because I've only set it for this form, so when this form comes back in, it will post the data to this URL, which is actually an A5W page, which I've called CWE hook 01. I'm passing a variable in, so I'm putting it into a variable called form data. And like I said, it's only got a fire if this particular specific form comes in. So what does that look like in Alpha? So if I go to the A5W pages, open it up, it's literally a page which is just sat waiting for this to come in, and it's literally wrapped itself inside an Ajax, an XBasic block. And the first thing it's doing is checking, is it a post? We'll be adding some extra authentication on here. But then the next thing I'm doing is saying, okay, in this particular case, I want to actually grab that form data variable into a variable. I'm putting the timestamp on. I'm actually saving that to a file. So I've got a text file on the server with that specific form. So I'm basically capturing that just in case there's any issues. I've got a fail safe of actually having a text file that contains that whole JSON stored on the server. And then I'm going through the process of parsing it. So I'm reversing what happened when we came off the API into TransForm. I'm now reversing it back. So I'm grabbing the pointer variable, creating a pointer variable, passing that JSON string into the pointer variable. I'm opening up another, opening up another SQL connection. I'm checking if it's submitted, because if it's submitted, would it actually process this? Deliberately done that so that even if they upload to the server when the form is still open, I'm capturing that form status and details at that point. And so that's quite a deliberate plan. I want everything to come in, but it's only going to actually process this and put the information back into the system if the state of the form has been changed to submitted. So I will get used to this at some point. So then setting a bunch of arguments, I'm grabbing details off that form, off that JSON. A couple of things here to bear in mind that it's all text coming back in. So if I need to convert it back to a time field or to a number field, you've got to do it. And the other thing to point out is that for every single field on the form, if a field is not filled in, TransForm won't pass that back in the JSON string. So you need to, for safety's sake, use your val valid just to check actually is there an operative ID field returned by by TransForm. If there is, set the argument to the value of it. In this case, I'm converting it to a numeric field. If not, I'm just setting it to 0. So you repeat for each particular field on the form to make sure that you've got the argument set for everything. And then off the back of that, the last thing I'm doing on here now is, first of all, I'm checking a couple of things on here. I'm I'm doing a quick if statement. So for example, if route completed, if it's responded, because it wouldn't actually have that if it was not job specific, so you have to trap that. But if it is and it's yes, set the route completed true, otherwise set it to false, otherwise set it to blank. So in the last I'm doing a couple of SQL queries, and what they're doing is they're showing, so this is what I'm actually checking. Okay, is this the first record for this operative for this day? If there is, we need to create the new timesheet batch record. If it's not, we need to go and grab the batch ID, the ID for that timesheet batch record, before we actually put the records in. So what I'm then doing is I'll go down there. So what I'm doing here is opening up the connection. It's doing the query. I'm running that query to check if actually there is a timesheet batch. If the count is 0, either there isn't one, then I'm going to create it. I'm then going to go and get the batch ID from it. I'm then going to set that ID to an argument, and then I'm going to enter the actual record into the child table for the specific entry. If there is a record, then I just need to go and grab the ID for it before I then create the record. So the webhook is quite straightforward to do as well. Now that in itself demonstrates the process of coming from quite a simplified form. It's not using the full capabilities of TransForm for that particular form, but it's used as a purpose that they didn't want to have the operatives getting access to the application on the workshop, mainly because it's quite a noisy environment and quite a difficult environment for tech. So they have tablets which are not that expensive. They've got hardened screens on them, and in their words, they can be operated by people using pudgy fingers without too much difficulty. But also it's just opened up their eyes to other opportunities for other things they can use it for, where they can start using more of the capability of the TransForm connected to their application. They have another workshop, and in that other workshop, it's more controlled work in so much that they will renovate railway couplers. It's huge chunks of metal that connect railway carriages together, and every 500,000 miles or whatever it is, those couplers have to be stripped down, refurbished, put right, and be made good for another 500,000 miles or whatever it is. And there, the factory does process those couplers, and it's a bit of a production line thing where they've got, I think, 7 bays in there, where each coupler comes in, has to go through a set process. And we have got the forms in development on here now for this. And the first one on here would be and the idea being is that when a new coupler comes in, they stamp it up, they put it on the system, and the system will be generating the first form, which in this case is the inspection form. So then it would be pre-populated, but they would go through the process of inspecting, going through a set of instructions that they have to go through to check, specific things. If there's problems, they can add photos to it, so they're only evidence to it. But once that inspection has been completed and that form is submitted, which it can't do here because I haven't filled in the mandatory items, it would then push that back in using the similar webhook into the system. And the system will say, okay, you've done the inspection, so now I'm going to generate the next one, which is sorry, I did this wrong around. It should be the dismantle first, where they actually take it down, strip it down. Once the dismantling is done, it then goes to the inspection bay. So once the dismantle form is completed and submitted, it will then auto-generate the inspection form for that coupler for the next bay. So therefore, they will go through that process. When they inspect it, they will then establish what needs to be done to it, and it will then generate a repair activities form, which will only show the repairs that need to be done on that specific coupler. So it goes to one of 3 bays, depending on the repairs need to be done to it. They go through the process of repairing it. Once it's been repaired, they've got to put it back together. So it then goes to the assemble activities. You get the idea, and it follows through the flow. And then once it's assembled, it gets re-inspected, everything's okay, it goes out the door. The other thing they have on here is, because like I said at the start, they have safety critical requirements as far as they need to have traceability of the product they use. In this particular workshop, they have pins and other things they have to make and have manufactured, which then get used in the refurbishment process. And it's the other factory that will make those. But they do it in batches, and they bring batches in, a bit like a Kanban system. And but they need to be able to trace back those pins. So if there was a problem with the metal provided by one of their suppliers, they need to know where that metal was used. So how that works here is we've got an add stock form here, which they can then say, if they need 4 pins to go and work on this particular job they're doing for a particular coupler. They would go to the stores department, grab 4 from the bucket on the shelf, or the section on the shelf, and there's a barcode next to it, or QR code. They would scan that QR code and then put in how many they're going to use on this job. Does several things. First of all, it reduces down the stock item by the numbers they take out. It also then tags those parts back to that specific batch of stock. So therefore, if there's an issue, they've got full traceability back to where it ended up being used. And it's all done using, like I say, they scan the job number off the job card, which is a QR code on the job card, and they scan the bin number from where they're taking the parts and putting the quantity. So it's very quite quick and easy to do. But that's all part of that equation, which is currently under development. And that is actually using a heck of a lot more of the capabilities of TransForm, but integrating it with Alpha Anywhere. So, Dave, I think, I think I'm just about there. Unless anybody's got questions.
Hey, that is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so we reserved up to an hour, but I know there are a couple of questions who came up, and let's start with the first one, which has to do with when this was implemented. So this is sort of a high-level question. When this was implemented, what were the time savings, and how did it go about boosting productivity? I see one of the ways that you mentioned, and maybe you could elaborate a bit more, is that they no longer had to have a back office person needing to key in all of these what look like time cards or job requests. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's the first thing. That literally it freed up about 4 hours a day. So that's 20 hours a week, 80 hours a month, 960 hours a year. They have not had to put timesheets in anymore.
Wow.
But they haven't. So you could add that. That's a lot of time that guy has been repurposed to other things. It doesn't take him 4 hours every morning just to double check the timesheets on there, just to make sure that, to sort out any anomalies or anything else. So
yeah, I was about to say, so if you
thing.
use that time just to make sure that the data is accurate, maybe that wouldn't be time that he would have had before to look into
So that's
things
just
in quite as much detail.
That's the first tangible benefit, absolutely. But on top of that, there's a couple of intangible benefits as well. I'm just checking. That's 24 weeks of work saved by doing that.
Wow.
But the other thing that it also does is, which is even more important to the customer, is let me just do, if I can zoom in on here, that when they start looking at costings against a job, you can see here they've got the estimated unit price, the estimated costs, the actual cost. This isn't fully accurate because it's an old job, but the point being is it's becoming more accurate now that they know that they can look at their margins and know that they're hitting them. And then we take that further by pushing this information out using Power BI into some dashboards for them to look at. But they can then highlight, they can highlight very quickly where they're hitting their margins. If they're not hitting their margins, they know why. Because the point being on the timesheet record is, if all of a sudden it took 3 days to do something, it should have taken 2 days. It's because they were waiting for a machine to be repaired, or actually the application drawings were too vague and they actually got it wrong and they had to go and redo it. they can
Yeah.
start seeing that sort of information much more quickly. So the benefit to the business is the fact they're getting far better quality data about their working processes.
So
And
they can
also
measure and improve is kind of what it sounds like to me.
exactly, and therefore off the back of that, then if they
Yeah.
discover, well, actually, we estimated this job was going to take 120 hours, it took 140. Next time they quote for it, they're going to quote basically it's going to cost them 140 hours.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So I'm happy to see there's some people who are new-ish to TransForm joining us today. So we've had some new questions. And one of them, and this came from an Alpha Anywhere person, was, okay, so TransForm, is this kind of like so you don't have to build your own mobile application? And I guess I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I guess that's definitely a huge part of it. The fact that TransForm is already built, already in the store, and really, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really when you were building the mobile application part of it, it seemed probably to you a little bit more like configuration with some amount of programming. I know because you were doing Ajax callbacks, so you had to be using the TPL programming language in the back. But would you look at it that way, or do you have sort of a different
Yeah,
characterization?
it's a couple of these. First of all, as people that know me know, I'm quite busy. I do have a lot of clients. I do get through a lot of work. So I do like to template things to make it easier on myself. And TransForm is part of that equation. So if I go back on here, if you're building mobile apps specifically, you know,
Yeah,
there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 apps I'd have to build independently just for this
right,
to work.
right,
Where actually once I built one or two, it's very quick. And also the webhook concept is there. I can add extra functions to the XBasic class, so I can keep it on the same API callback, you know, and just say, okay, what form is this one? Okay, it's this form, therefore run this function. So there's all that sort of built-in logic that I can deploy much quicker, much more cost-effective for me. So me, it's not about, if I was bidding by the minute, then maybe I would want to go off and spend a lot of time doing lots of applications. But
sure,
I wouldn't necessarily get the work. You know,
yeah,
the whole point is this is exciting a client to the point where all of a sudden now we're thinking, hang on a minute, yeah. And this is just the start of it. And there's other things. I've got another client where it started off with a fairly couple of straightforward forms we're looking at. Now they're thinking, well, actually, we need a holiday request form. We've got mobile technicians. If they want to request a holiday, let's give them a holiday request form they can fill in and submit.
sure.
Stuff like this. And then there's another one which I've got, which is under development, which is a huge form. And it's at the minute it's sitting at about 500 questions on that one form, with lots shown high and everything else. And again,
That's a lot of questions.
yeah, but it's actually
But
it's a
I
process.
suspect, yeah, it's probably manageable. You broke it up into pages and you did if thens and all that. So probably for
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
user, it seems good. Yeah, we've seen some pretty monstrously big forms put into TransForm, and they've been very easy to navigate. It isn't like taking a PDF form and just shrinking it down to a mobile device. You do have to kind of lay them out a little bit differently, but the
Yeah,
results are
there's a
good.
lot of logic involved. One of them is a survey form, environmental survey form, where there's a lot of stuff that's pushed out into the form in the first instance, but the surveyor on site then has to go through the process of checking the data, but then adding stuff to it, taking photographs,
Oh, okay, yeah,
doing data sampling and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah.
some of it may not be needed, some will be needed. Yeah.
So I definitely saw that you used some TPL, and were you also using the Alpha Transform API as well, or were you just using the on submit events?
I'm predominantly using the on submit events.
Great.
There's other applications where I'm using the TransForm API, but by and large, I'm using it. I'm using it within Alpha to drive. You know, there is a couple of applications where I'm using the dashboard type style thing in
Oh,
connectivity
sure.
on Alpha anyway,
Yep.
and I'm
Yep.
using the APIs there to use that. But for this particular one, I don't need to push up forms.
Great.
Partly computer forms. If I've got another application where I am, there are lots of applications where I actually tried to push data up, and therefore I'm using the Alpha, the TransForm API to push that up. So I'm building an XBasic
Uh-huh.
function within a component to push a form up in the first place. Yeah.
Now, when you were building that, did you use the TransForm API Explorer that's built into Alpha Anywhere?
For the initial one, yes, and then I've got it
Yeah.
templated. So,
And then you
yeah.
got to template it afterwards. Okay, great. Another question, and this is something we speculated people were doing, but sometimes we're just the software designers, and you're the person who's actually out there with the clients showing this stuff off. It seemed to me that an advantage to TransForm would be that you would be able to very quickly put together a form, even if it weren't hooked up, and be able to show it to the client and get them excited that they saw something real. Is that just something we're thinking, or is that actually happening in real life?
It's happening. Well, it's happening more in real life. I had one
Okay.
because of COVID-19 where it was during the lockdown. One of my other clients
Uh,
who they have 135 depots around the country in the area work area that they have, and they've shut down all but 20 of them, furloughing the staff in 110 odd depots whilst the lockdown's going on over here.
oh
Um,
boy, yeah.
but I mean, because of the government help, it means that they can fire those back up again when the lockdown's over. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, the problem they suddenly discovered was, having done that, there was an unintended consequence, was that their insurance company turned around and said, "Hey guys, you've got to go and check those depots every 7 days to make sure that there's no vermin infestation, there's no water issues, there's no vandalism, it's all
Oh,
safe and
sure.
secure."
Yep.
So we had to get a form out pretty quickly, and we did it. We got a form done. I had a test form done within a few hours, which then went to the CEO for them to check the following day, and it kind of blew the CEO's mind because we had a form which more than replicated the insurance paper Word document form that they put together really quickly, but added a lot more logic to it, and we've since padded that out now so that that's actually it takes photographs, it pushes it back into the system in the same sort of concept, and then there's immediately a PDF report built off the back of it then, which is available to go to the insurer. But what it's also doing, the next stage of that was, if they identified any issues, it's now back in Alpha, it's flagging up those issues
Mhm.
and telling them, you need to deal with this. So it's giving them the details they need to make sure, if they discover, well, actually, there was a problem with the steel shutters here, there's a photo evidence, that it's holding somebody accountable to say, right, we need to get that fixed. Yeah.
Really cool. So someone here asked a question about offline capabilities. And certainly we talk about offline all the time when we talk about Alpha Anywhere, but some people don't know, who are new, that TransForm is also an offline capable application. You can open up the application in the morning, download the information that you need to work with during the day, and then go offline, fill in forms, collect data, fill out new instances of forms, and so on. And when you get a connection back again, you can then synchronize that data. Now, some of the example you showed today wasn't an offline situation, at least in parts of it, because it looks like you were doing AJAX callbacks, which necessitate you being online, because otherwise that can't work. But are you doing any offline stuff, or your application's pretty much relying on
No,
a single signal?
it's funny because I guess, and I'm guessing here, that when Transformers first evolved, it was really the key market would be the mobile field engineer or somebody like that out on the road who
Yeah.
needs that sort of offline capability. Whereas this particular one is about, this is all at the moment for these forms we've done so far. It's
Yeah.
within workshops where they've got Wi-Fi capability and it's reliable, so they don't need to worry about that.
Oh,
Having
that's
said that,
great.
they
Yeah.
are going to be doing further on that, but I do have other applications where we don't have that. So I tend to, rather than doing, for some of the AJAX, so instead of doing the API callbacks to go and grab data, I'm then using the on-device data to
Right.
contain that
The
information. Yeah.
SQLite database in particular is supported by TransForm and by TPL on the backside.
Yes, absolutely, and that's what I use. So we could, for example, that operative list on that first form I showed is actually a SQLite database on there.
Yeah.
No, sorry, it's not anymore. It was initially, but it's an API callback, because that's actually is making a callback, but it could be a SQLite database. There's others where I do have another one with just proof of concept for a client yesterday, where it's a storage company that have to go and pick up people's items, and they need and put them into store. They would have an inventory already on the system, and we're putting that in on a on-device form in a PDF, so they can open up the form. The driver can open up the form then and there and check what they're picking up matches what's on that inventory. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so the question is, oh, good, a technical one. I like that. And the question is, could you use an XBasic web service in the webhook rather than an A5W page? You could then restrict to only posts and use the built-in auditing. And the answer to that is you sure can. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, but I've also, what I haven't showed on there is I can add authentication to that web service anyway, so that you can authenticate it directly in there. And it was, let's have a look. And you've got authentication built in where you can actually,
there's your web service right there.
Authentication straight in, so you could pass through, so to make sure it's coming back from that device correctly. Absolutely.
Fantastic. That looks like it for questions. That is a really, really amazing demo. I mean, definitely the most sophisticated system we've ever shown on a TransForm Tuesday, and really, really quite impressive. I understand that you also work closely with a group that isn't directly affiliated Alpha, but related to Alpha, called the IADN, the the International Alpha Developers Network. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or would you like to add something else? Or
yeah, it's basically I've got quite involved with it over the last couple of years, because I think by virtue of what Alpha do, you produce a fantastic product as far as Alpha Anywhere and TransForm, but your key strengths is those products. Whereas for me as a business person, I have a business to run, and that business means that I have a toolbox full of tools I use. For want of a better description, my weapon of choice for development is Alpha Anywhere and Alpha TransForm, but there's other things I need to use as well.
Sure.
And there's more to running the business than just developing. Unfortunately, I wish it was just developing, but unfortunately it's not. So therefore, I think IADN has a place to help people of all levels of expertise to find out and remind people of what's available, do training sessions, and we are planning to do a training session along the lines of what I've sort of kind of demoed today within IADN. So if you go to iadn.com, you can check out what's available there. But yeah, and we also have a Friday webinar where we have a lot of open forum ones as well, where we talk through and we showcase and we present things across the community. And it's a wide and varied community with a lot of experience in Alpha.
I've had the privilege of sitting in on a few of those, and they do seem really helpful if you are a developer. Of course, I'm just the software person on the other side, so I don't know a lot about running the businesses the way you do, and that seems to be a nice key portion there, that you guys are into Alpha, but you also need to run businesses and grow your businesses and get teams and hire workers and do all the other things that are required. You guys seem to have
some of the most popular events on there is when we do a show and tell. Bring your project, show us a problem, we'll see if we can help you fix it or find a way to do it.
That's cool.
And inevitably there's 100 million ways to resolve the same issue.
Nice. Do you want to bring up the iadn.com website on your browser just so people know what it looks like if they decide to go there themselves?
Yeah.com. Okay, International Alpha Developers Network. There's training section on there, there's classes, training resources, various things. The webinars, the Friday webinars are on here. There's other ones that go on as well. So yeah, there's a forum on here as well, but it's not used that much, if we're honest. There's videos available. So yeah, it's iadn.com. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. I see we're out of questions. So is there anything else you'd like to add, or is that about it?
The only thing I would say is that, like I say, from my business perspective, I'm self-employed, I'm a sole trader, it's just me. I can call it other people, but I do have to be quite smart in how I work. So I do have to take advantage of the things, and that's where There is, I think, the value for Alpha TransForm came across me really quickly. Yes, there's a monthly cost per user license, but actually, from a client perspective, the amount of time that they can save, the tangible time they save, more than outweighs the cost. I said just that one case I've gone through today, there's 24 weeks a year saving just from having that timesheet form on there, and that's not the most difficult form that you can do by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for presenting today. I really appreciate it. I know people here are very impressed looking at the comments. We wish you well. And for all of you who joined us today, thank you very much. We hope to see you at next Transform Tuesday. Take care, stay safe, stay well. Goodbye.